Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from Michael Benson. Terence Crawford said, when Pacquiao fight fell through, I hit up Bob Arum and told Todd do both. I said, I don't want to fight Brook, or for Thurman to fight. They come back and said, that fight is never happening. I said, why? They said, he wants $10 million. We've talked about this before, that it's ludicrous for Keith Thurman to expect Top Rank to guarantee him. Emphasis on guarantee. We're not talking about the upside of a pay-per-view. We're talking about what Top Rank would put up, what he expected them to put up to get him on their side of the street.
10 million?
And how it's ludicrous, especially during a pandemic, in the absence of a live gate, a live audience. It's ludicrous for Keith Thurman to have expected Top Rank to put up $10 million guaranteed when he was only guaranteed $2 million to fight a bigger name in Manny Pacquiao. And what that accents, what that denotes is that Keith Thurman was never serious about fighting Terence Crawford. He was bluffing.
Isn't that obvious?
Really don't know how anybody in their right mind could have believed that Keith Thurman was willing to fight Terence Crawford under those circumstances. I don't know how anybody believed it then. I don't know how anybody could believe it now.
We talked about this in the past.
It's fight week for Terence Crawford. He's going to be taking on Kell Brook, and for the longest time, I told you guys, that's the likeliest candidate to be Terence Crawford's next opponent. More so than Keith Thurman, because Kell Brook, unlike Keith Thurman, isn't bluffing. He isn't playing games. He's not posturing. He was always serious about wanting a Terence Crawford fight.
Thurman wasn't.
When all those articles were floating around about how Keith Thurman was urging Terence Crawford to send him a contract, I never bought into that stuff. I didn't.
It's bullshit.
I entertained the possibility that maybe Keith is serious, but the more I thought about it, I thought to myself, no fucking way, man. This guy's one of the most disingenuous guys in the welterweight division.
Oh.
For those interested in that video, those videos, I'll leave the links to them in the description box. Keith Thurman strikes me as being quite disingenuous. He strikes me as being quite fake. And I'm not alone. Errol Spence Jr. shares that sentiment. Spence on fighting Thurman. That shit ain't happening. Fuck Keith Thurman. He's quoted as saying, I guess I'm going up or down. One of those two, because, that shit ain't happening. Fuck Keith Thurman. I don't like him, Spence said. That's just one guy I just never liked. Like, there's a lot of boxers out there that I really don't care for, but him, I just don't like him. I just feel like he's just fake. Everything about him. I just don't like him at all. Errol Spence Jr. here is echoing the sentiments I've expressed on this channel many times over, that I don't buy into Keith Thurman's bravado. I don't buy into his talk. I think that he is being rather disingenuous. I think he's fake. I don't believe for a second this guy was down to fight Terence Crawford.
No way.
I don't know how anyone could. Right now, you got guys that are turning their fucking noses up at the Kell Brook versus Terence Crawford fight because they'd rather see Crawford fight Keith Thurman, as if Keith Thurman actually wanted that fight.
I never did.
Can't you read between the lines? Can't you see? What are you, an idiot? Given the state of this guy, what condition he's in right now, you actually think he would have fought Terence Crawford before this year was out? If you do, come here. I got this bridge I want to sell you. Too often in boxing, the perceptions of the fight fans are skewed perceptions, often influenced by the familiarity of a fighter, outlying factors, intangibles, and the actual nuts and bolts of the thing get overlooked. You don't have to question whether or not Kell Brook actually wanted this Terence Crawford fight because he's been campaigning for it for at least a year. And Kell Brook, unlike Keith Thurman, has already had his token give-me fight of this year. He was actually in action in February. He shook off his cobwebs. He had his tune-up fight. But Keith, where's Keith? Why hasn't Keith had a tune-up fight yet? If this guy was in any kind of shape, if he was fit to fight, when the talks with Terence Crawford fizzled out, why didn't he just schedule another fight? Why didn't he rebound off that loss to Manny Pacquiao? Because that's what he's coming from, folks. A loss to Manny Pacquiao and over a year of inactivity. Some people out there think this guy was in the right physical condition to take on a world-class fighter like Terence Crawford. I don't.
Nope.
I think the guy was bluffing the whole time. But if you believe him, then you explain it. If Keith Thurman was fit to fight the likes of a Terence Crawford, why hasn't he fought anybody else yet? Those talks fizzled out. We all know why. But if this guy actually was fit to fight Terence Crawford, someone like him, why didn't he just schedule a fight with somebody else as soon as those talks fizzled out? Where is Keith Thurman?
Nowhere.
I'll tell you where he is.
Nowhere.
You'd have to be gullible to believe that Keith Thurman really wanted this fight. You'd have to be gullible to believe that and turn your nose up at Kell Brook as an opponent option when Kell Brook actually wants to be here. And he's wanted to be here for over a year. But you're going to turn your nose up at this because you feel Keith Thurman would have been a better option. I'll tell you what I think. I think in terms of marquee value and the attention that a fight could get, perhaps that would make Keith Thurman a better opponent option. That if you want to get the fight more of attention, then you conjure up Keith. But that's assuming Keith even wants to be there, and I reiterate, I don't think he does. I don't think he ever did. Better still, if Keith Thurman brings something to the table, he would have brought the fight a little bit more attention due to the ongoing rivalry between PBC fighters and top-ranked fighters.
That's it.
Maybe in that arena, maybe in that scope, Keith Thurman would have been a better option. But as far as what goes on inside of the ring, and whether or not Keith Thurman wants to be there, he doesn't. And Kell Brook does.
Why do you think he's not back yet?
It doesn't strike you guys as odd that Errol Spence Jr. was involved in what was a very horrific car accident. And in spite of this, Errol Spence Jr. will be returning to the ring before Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman in a car accident?
That doesn't strike you guys as odd, right?
Of course, you're so fucking perceptive. You're so fucking smart. No, it was Top Rank that didn't want to fight. They didn't want to make it. Keith's too good. He's an elite level guy. He's too solid. So solid, he lost his fucking world title to a 40-year-old Manny Pacquiao that Jeff Horn was pushing around. That's how solid Keith Thurman is. And to top it all off, that was over a year ago. Keith Thurman hasn't even rebounded yet. But you fucking geniuses. You believe Keith. You think he was being serious. At some point, you have to come to terms with people being too fucking stupid, too fucking gullible, too fucking naive for their own good. At some point, as a boxing fan, you have to acknowledge that some arguments just aren't worth having, and some things just aren't worth entertaining. Furthermore, I can only tell you what I think and how I got there. And if you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do. I don't believe for a second Keith Thurman ever wanted that Terrence Crawford fight. I just think he wanted people to write articles about him because he didn't have anything lined up. Errol Spence Jr.'s not giving him the time of day. He's not likely to get a Pacquiao rematch. He's not gonna risk ruining what's left of his career locking horns with Terrence Crawford because that's certain defeat that awaits him.
He wants to cash out.
He does, and that's why he priced himself out of the Terrence Crawford fight. He's just trying to stay in the conversation as best as he can, long enough that he can, very soon, in the near future, cash out. I think that Keith Thurman's days in the sport of boxing are numbered. I think that this guy's career is circling the drain, and he's very close to retirement. That's what I think. And other news, per tweet from Sarah Shepard, despite reports to the contrary, the Athletic Box understands there will be no Zuffa Boxing Women's event held in Nevada in December due to the current challenges posed by COVID. Huge shame. Would have been a big opportunity for some of the biggest names in women's boxing. The card they're talking about was the upcoming Shields versus Caire card. Rumor had it that it wasn't just going to be Shields on that card, it was also going to be WBA regular champion Hannah Gabriels against Raquel Miller, and Amanda Serrano was set to be making an appearance on that card in what was rumored to be a unification match, in all likelihood with Sarah Mahfoud, since we all know who Jelena Marjanovic is going to be fighting in the very near future. Sarah is the only other champion available in the featherweight division for Amanda to unify with. Clarissa Shields took to Twitter and said, "Everybody else is getting fights announced, and here I am. Man, this is crazy." Specifically, in detail, we don't know what challenges may have stopped this card from taking place because there are several other cards, major cards, happening at or around that same time. The Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Garcia fight, the Anthony Joshua versus Kubrat Pulev mandated title defense. There are other things happening at or around the same time that this card was supposed to go down. So what challenges could COVID have posed that delayed this fight where those other fights are still set to go down? It's not like there isn't a blueprint already laid out, a modus operandi as to how to stage boxing matches throughout the course of this global pandemic. Top Rank's got their bubble, Matchroom's got theirs, BT Sport and Queensbury, they've got theirs. So what's actually stopping Zuffa Boxing from getting off the goddamn ground?
because we've been hearing about Zuffa Boxing and how Dana White was going to enter into the world of boxing as a promoter for years now. But as it stands, Zuffa Boxing has never gained any actual traction. It's never actually gotten off the ground. And it's a great pity because I was looking forward to that Shields versus Caire fight. Moreover, the rumors associated with that card, that you were going to get Hannah Gabriels versus Raquel Miller, that you were going to get Amanda Serrano versus Sarah Mahfoud in a unification match. It would have been a knockout card. It really would have been, had it gone through, but apparently it's not going to. Really does look like Claressa Shields' relationship with Showtime is all but over, and she is not finding the stability in her current situation that she had before. She's not finding the stability that you see in Katie Taylor's career. Katie Taylor, who's promoted by Matchroom. Let me tell you something. A lot of people got a lot of things to say about Eddie Hearn, but as far as promoters go, that man is doing a bang-up job. I mean, he really is. Katie Taylor's career didn't miss a beat in 2020. Not only did she have the rematch with Delphine Passoon, but she's set to defend all her world titles again this weekend. Put simply, he found a way to get things done. Claressa Shields has been promoted by Salida Promotions, a much smaller outfit, and for what it's worth, I think Dimitri Salida has done an all-right job with Claressa, though I reiterate, here and now, she is lacking the stability that we see in Matchroom in Katie Taylor's career.
Is she still even with Dimitri Salida?
That's a valid question here and now because something has obviously changed. Claressa Shields' fights are no longer on Showtime. Is it possible that her relationship with Dimitri Salida has ended because Salida was her promoter and Zuffa Boxing is set to be Dana White's promotional outfit?
This was supposed to be a Zuffa Boxing card.
There's a lot we don't know about the situation, and the only hope we have now is that it's not an outright cancellation so much as a postponement, that even if the card doesn't take place this December before the year is out, perhaps sometime early next year, January, February.
Maybe then.
Maybe the card happens then. They never even got the chance to make an official announcement for this card. It seems that it was doomed. It ended before it even started, and it's a great pity because I think it would have been a great card. Just another byproduct of these COVID times that we're all living in. And finally, I'm sure that most of you have heard by now that the Nordine Oubaali mandated title defense against Nonito Donaire has been postponed. Nonito's going to be fighting in December, just not against Nordine Oubaali. It won't be for the WBC title. It's going to come against former IBF champion Emmanuel Rodriguez. And for what it's worth, that's a nice little fight, though there's not as much on the line. Better still, that has all the makings of an interesting fight, an interesting match. And if you're like me and you were looking forward to this Donaire versus Oubaali fight, obviously you're disappointed because Nonito stood more than just a fighting chance here. There was a legitimate possibility that he might beat Nordine Oubaali and become the WBC champion in the process, thereby setting up the Inoue rematch, as there would have been that much more reason to stage it if Nonito can procure a world title, since we all know Naoya Inoue is belt hunting. He means to unify.
Wants to become undisputed.
It's a shame. It's a real pity. It really is, because I reiterate, Nonito stood more than just a fighting chance here. He stood a legitimate chance of becoming the WBC champion, but apparently Nordine Oubaali was going through some visa issues that prevented him from getting the necessary clearances to travel from France to the United States. So it really is disappointing, but believe it or not, there's actually a silver lining here. There's actually a silver lining in all of this. And it's that Nordine Oubaali is no longer preoccupied with Nonito Donaire.
Not anymore.
You ain't gotta fight that guy, at least not right now. And in essence, he has bought himself enough time that if he so chose to pursue it, he could see about unifying with Naoya Inoue. That's right. That's the silver lining here, that
Maybe they can see about making that fight for early next year.
we know that Naoya Inoue was set to unify with Jonriel Casimiro before COVID-19 shut everything down. And afterwards, things stopped looking encouraging for that fight. It seemed like Sean Gibbons was guiding his boy Casimiro away from that match. And that is a match that, at least based on reports, won't happen unless there's a crowd present. That's where we are with that fight, you understand. And there really are only two other world champions for Naoya Inoue to unify with, Jonriel Casimiro among them. So if things aren't looking encouraging with Jonriel Casimiro,
If they're not.
and Nordine Oubaali's not going to be fighting Nonito Donaire at the end of this year, who's to say they can't use this as an opportunity to stage an Inui versus Oubaali fight early next year?
Because the Donaire-Ubali fight is scrapped. You know, Nonito might have maintained his status as Nordine Ubali's mandatory challenger. That might be the case, but at the end of the day, the fight's not happening. And Nonito, he's going to be fighting somebody else. That's where we are with that fight, you understand? So can't Nordine Ubali and his team use that as an opportunity to petition the WBC for an exemption to the mandatory so that early next year, he can unify with Naoya Inoue? Look, it wasn't a foregone conclusion that Nordine was going to retain his title against Oubaali-Donaire. There was a chance that Nordine would have lost that fight. And for running those risks to defend your one world title, why don't you run those same risks with Inui to see about fighting for all four? It's a bigger fight. It's a bigger payday. That's the silver lining here.
No, we're not getting Oubaali versus Donaire, but perhaps that can be used as an opportunity with some ingenue to bring us Oubaali versus Inui. I think that's an avenue of opportunity that needs to be explored. I think that that's something that the WBC might be open to, because we all know how much they love their sanctioning fees, and you'd get bigger sanctioning fees from an Inui-Oubaali unification match than what you would get from a Oubaali versus Donaire title defense. So, I don't know if it's going to happen that way, but let's hope that it does.